works better if you drink more wine. Himself was inspired by a wine press. We follow that tradition here.
I'm drinking wine as well.
So yeah, it's just trying to get, you gotta get down.
So Peter,
Yeah, this one we want.
the Los Angeles wording, was it a separate plate? The Los Angeles wording, was it a separate plate added over? To the original? To that plate?
No.
So it was just different.
Do this in full color. Which one do you please?
Black.
Like the little kid you look real close at.
Put a handle with a handle.
So we have.
Hi, Janet.
Art?
Great to have you down.
Great to be here. I never printed on this, so I just did.
I love a Civil War press.
Amazing.
So I
We got all the way down to small size.
Martin is to go either way.
People in the office, we're running out people absorbing the price of their printers.
So the early democratization.
Just the plate, just the
Yeah, they were doing this in the mid-19th century, and then they also started marketing.
And you have those at the museum?
Kids.
Plates you brought here?
It's such a genius.
The design is wonderful.
And these got the other.
And it is a spring.
We got them different times.
I
We didn't
saw
know.
that.
We have no idea how
See how she prints. Did you print
I
already?
printed.
Let me show you the small one. The small one. I found one.
Yeah, so. Because they came, Lindsay Frost was being a printer. And I forgot which one it was, but was it Robertson? So, I think it's better.
I can tell I never really comes in. We're going to do the presentation at 6:30.
And I drove 9.5 hours to be on the west side of Sacramento by 3:30. That plate, those plates. That was a bad day. I'm coming back and so when I get back the next day, I was on a mission to get there.
Every time visitors come, I give it to them. The first question I ask is, how did you find this?
Or is this your first time? The answer is often yes.
And I always end it with, tell your friends and that's so long as
See what else the other day. They do.
Yeah, so you still get to play away. Yeah. She was upset.
No, I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, well, evidently.
So, well, I'm not sure that one is.
Oh my God. We'll go this call. Yeah, you're actually getting to do the same thing that happened. Yeah, no, you do all the playing tonight, and you'll have less people to, correct.
Well, I forget. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, let's compare. Yeah. But I didn't.
So, start anywhere double cheeseburger. We also have wine and snacks, which are pretty
Well,
Well, I don't have a menu.
So, in order to print,
can I pick the color I want?
yeah, so with all of these, you're going to want to ink up your roller.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this and pull that over a bit.
I know.
Like Roy Rogers.
That's why I think it's different.
Okay.
I'm going to set that back there.
Like that.
Paper on top.
Oh, yes, our first laptop.
Can I put it in my hand?
Well, it's the equivalent of
And
it.
then grab the handle of that code over there.
It was actually very low. And during the Civil War, they would use this to issue orders.
What?
Oh, I just said this.
If an army, like the Union Army was in, they'd issue
And
orders.
it's made to lift it up.
Wow, look at that.
You
We're so excited. So I teach those. Yeah. Jade over there teaches for routine classes, so it's like the organs yeah, we're not really checking that, but there's only 6 complete classes by the board.
Let's see what you got. Beautiful. Let's see again. Very cool.
So what is everybody doing?
It's supposed to be a Jo Mora.
What, yes, it is.
Let's see if this does enough. Okay, so grab that handle and give it a roll. So whichever direction it's supposed to go in, it'll go easily. Alright, I don't think it probably took because it's a lot of resistance. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have camping?
No, I don't see. I bet they have whites.
So what do we do? Yeah, camping or the
Close about it. I think it looks kind of good. So, do you think it worked?
And it's in.
Okay. Have some resistance.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh well. That's okay.
I'm so totally lost in confusion.
I don't want to walk in front of you.
Oh, don't worry. We're good.
Okay, let's read that. Yeah. I'm here to work it. I had it all set up. Well, you didn't mess up. I do need this.
So what if you
Nice.
Well, don't take that back. All of this stuff is hands-on for people in free. So California and for tonight's and also
you and I.
You're not filming that, are you? Thank you. I have to pay you off.
I think maybe I put too much on here this time.
Oh my.
Mark, I put too much packing on. Right. When I try this one, I had this set up to have enough packing a little bit.
Oh my God. For this. So now we can have some traffic or now it's all with it. So I want to buy something. Should I wait? No, man.
I got you. Is that the declaration?
Yes.
Yeah, you can see it at my
From our other press conference.
Yeah.
Adorable. My best friend was Bob Matson, and he passed away in March, and he was a big Jo Mora fan. He was friends with Peter and Joss, and I would have driven him down for this. He was still with us, but he's looking down. He'd be getting such a kick out of this. So wonderful you do this. Who knew? We love it. We've been here probably voluntarily the whole time. It's probably my little pile.
It's pretty amazing when you realize as much as you're into this, that you actually be seeing for all. It's spectacular, isn't it?
This friend of mine, this one,
Yeah.
those two
He would have
blocks.
died if he hasn't passed already.
Right?
Right?
It would have.
No, I understand. It's amazing.
No, I'm just going to.
My wife is so used to it.
Take two hands. Okay. Take two hands. Just go one way. Don't go. Come back. One way. There you go. Push right.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. How are you? I know. Okay. Show you how to do it. Okay.
Right. So then, like the next time, yeah, that's what it's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What color would you like in the paper? I'm going to use the white paper. Oh. So I can see it. Every detail. Beautiful. How are you? Now tomorrow is it going to be kind of the same? Good. So I'm glad I came. I spotted it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, initially we were like, this is
that's okay.
stars just picked up big
No, I'm telling you, still alive.
just for this reason.
Yeah. Now it's not enough. And then do I just lay it like this? And bring it all the way across to me. Yeah, they are. Do I go back?
You don't have to.
You might as well. You're up with it. I know will it have gotten Steve? Yeah. We'll see. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay. Do you want it here?
How are you? Yeah, you're good. Not really checking because it's
There's a bag right over on the other side.
Do you have bags for them or no?
I do. They're over there.
Okay.
So feel free to grab snacks and drinks. We're doing printing demos until about 6:30. We didn't want people to feel rushed. Thank you. Sure.
Where are the bags?
They're right over there by Gail. I'll put this in the I'm sorry, I should have put, because I know what's to be. Curator has a stage. Carson's back over there. These two, you want to make them like that? These are great. What's going on if you want to just be a minute.
There we go. Hi. Printing one of these.
I think it's Elizabeth for us.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Yep, that's it.
Oh, good.
Go for it. Oh, he's back there. Let's say hi. It's gonna get tighter. Thank you. All right. You did one time with the mouth? Yeah.
These ones, you guys, we can print on these ones too, and press it, so we're going to be printing after the talk too. So. And Peter's doing giving tours, both now and after the talk, so if anybody wants to get a little tour of the museum, we'll be doing that. The ones that are, there's a couple of these that belong to, this is one, that's one, and those ones are ours. And then we have, and then these ones are yours.
You know what I mean? Something to
You might want to first start with a little bit less pressure on the plate. Actually, you know what it is? We don't have the right packing because it fell off. So this one we should reset the pack.
Okay.
Mark, do we have a little bit more of the red ink?
That you're going to reset the
I always love it.
It's coming full circle. It's sort of like we're working here, where now it's like, oh, that's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
that's what I like. It's not actually studying right now.
So, alright, do you want to get a guinea pig or should I try it?
Let you, I don't mind, I'm gonna let you try it actually, because I want it to be even.
I mean, it's probably going to be bad, so that's why I want to do it. Well, it's all good.
White?
Yeah, this is just a test to see how we do. See if we got any pressure on there. Grab it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just try this. See if we got it.
And it just goes, I'm just feeling very clumsy.
Okay, so that definitely doesn't matter.
Oh, it needs a little bit of push.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be a little bit tighter.
Give it a
Yeah.
Let's try that again.
All right, even the same paper?
Yep. Okay, there we go, there we go. Okay, let's pull that up, see if it looks like anything.
Oh, yes. Beautiful.
Okay. So, re-ink that.
Okay. You want me to try inking it? Ooh, watch your son's back. So that was the Civil War flower. Oh, okay. Now, what I
Good. So I can control it. Yeah.
Yeah, the research he had
No,
to
that's
do
right.
to put this together is amazing. This one more than any other spot. So, I mean, it's got these population balloons.
Wow.
It's like a balloon. It's bigger as population grows. It's got the numbers in there. So,
It's very interesting because that's how we symbolize population changes now. That's what happens in Islam.
oh, okay.
So it's a very common form to demonstrate size.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Larger
Well, he
circles,
was
smaller.
he was ahead of his time.
He understood the symbology.
Yeah.
How'd they get one get down so low?
I don't know if I got from Peter today, but I guess the whole problem is color, right? Extremely time intensive.
He's in the red shirt.
You don't want to get this, you don't want to get that.
Do I go from this way? What you have to do is make sure it's all am I getting no color
Let me do one.
So far, I got everything else. To like be like brown, white. Like no.
I have one more.
So this way,
Are you doing a full set? Cool.
It's just kind of a different situation. I know yeah, I know. Also, this was like, just got this back because they were doing Christmas. And it's been like hiding in the closet since the summer. Somebody get like a white
Terrapin. Yeah. We have a neighbor that has a big tortoise.
Oh, you'll have to do
Front
one
yard.
for them. Oh, yeah. This is non-toxic, right? Oh, you don't want to eat this stuff. You have this.
And you never roll it over. Once it's inked, that's it. Don't roll it down.
Well, those are not
Don't go back the other way.
No, because then you know, you might lose the paper.
Oh, yeah, no, I want to. Very cool.
That's where I
You get all of them. Print all of them. Multiple books.
I bought the bird singles sweethearts in the road, and I thought, who is this guy who did this? And that brought me into his world. It was just, you know, it had all those little different colors.
These dry pretty easy, don't they? No, not always.
I mean, if you took your finger and rubbed it,
Oh, yeah, it's not.
I have to be told there was a difference.
This is a series of windows we got. Chicago. Truck pickup stuff.
I think this one's this young man. This is yours, yes?
Semi-trailers. That's some of the containers, trailers, warehouses. More containers off-site. We have another warehouse space, 5,000 square feet. More stuff for us. That's our teaching. So we teach this here at the Art of Printing. So we get 3D printing, making, wood type, and they're very engaging classes, meetings, and also the windows. These are done by Eddie Miller. But he also did all of the society and typographic arts.
yes, or
And
reading
he was a
cards or
typographer and a graphic artist and designer and all those things. So he did the mission for the society. And he acquired it from a guy who had acquired it from a printing shop who had a that shop with Ellie Japanese machinery to be able to got the presses and these things and put it into these little private reviews. And We acquired photography, printing from stone. These are very beautiful color printing passes. Printing today is done by photography, not by stone. This is a litho press with a metal plate on it. It's not raised like you have over here. It's just a flat image on a metal plate. And there's a chemistry process that allows it to basically. The lithography of the 19th century allowed. No, this one we never turned on. It's a big boy. This is 1936. It's a 4-color, 1, 2, 3, 4 colors web offset press. That means a roll of paper goes in, it prints it, and then it folds it and makes it into like a paper or newspaper or anything. And this is the beginnings of your modern newspaper press. If you went to go to any newspaper shop, you would see a giant version of this stereo press. This is one of the earlier ones with that style. And the guy who had this in Milwaukee, and I acquired it from him, he used it to print wall panels. Remember the old wall one day? That was his national product. This is the press that printed all of those calendars. And
Are you like the go-to guy if people have
I'm just like an addict collector too. So I'm the director of the Curator, but I'm also an avid collector. So this one I tracked it down and managed to get it. So, but it is 28,000 pounds, so it doesn't move. So once you get it, you have it. Now, here's a fun question to ask you. So they put it on display after they finish using it. Those are the last printing quotes. Can you read the dates, the 7 and the 6, are the dates of the month? So my question for you, here's my question. Now, what was the last year this press was used to print? That would mean that you are a printer going on this. You right to the dollar. That's all you're doing. 1971. You were the print the year before we walk out.
What color is this?
That's sort of okay, so now.
Alright, so now let's read this guy.
So that doesn't matter how you
I think you should do it one direction. It's
So this was my favorite. Right? This was
She asked. Oh.
This one is
Okay.
this one is turn around.
Oh. Okay.
So do we just throw it away?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, 2 yellow ones.
I'm getting texts from people that are watching the stream
Oh,
already.
really? Oh, good.
Yeah, so Lorna and Wendy are watching it. My mom's watching it.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, that's promising.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a big discussion as to how soon do you let people know that it's going to be online.
I know. So I was like, I don't want people to not come.
I know. That's why I waited until Monday, Tuesday to
Yeah.
because by then they've already made their plans.
Yeah. I put an email about it and stuff. Just a lot of artists.
Yeah.
We announced it.
This there.
Good.
Have you gotten a chance to cut these?
I'm a resident reader, but I'm so doubtful.
Get all the information you can, huh?
What is it?
I would think so.
Don't worry about grades or discipline.
Do I need to do this again, or are we good?
We're going to get started in about 5 minutes in the theater. You're welcome to take some food in there with you. Just make sure it goes into your mouth, not on the floor. Certainly appreciate that. We'll be doing more tours afterwards. Peter, wave your hand. He's going to be giving... Both Peters will be giving tours afterwards. We'll see how much Peter Hiller knows on this. And we'll be doing printing demonstrations and the like. But do grab a beverage.
I'm so sorry.
You did.
I kicked it right away from you.
So he picked up one to show me, you know, what letter it is. Oh, no. Was it red? I should have taken a picture of the whole letter. So I wanted to ask him for it. Oh, fine. That's really good.
Sorry. No, you're good. That was on me. Oh.
It's just a beginning.
Yeah.
I'm really needy.
I know, like, I kept like.
I'm getting it your way. Just trying to document things. A little bit of both. So it's probably going to be this day.
I just need to know what I need to prepare. I'll let you know.
Yeah. I'm good with you.
Because I also
See, I
want
think
to.
we're going
Well, I
to
can
give
use
you
your
my end up over. I got the card out.
Okay.
We can,
Okay.
you can,
Yeah, no, that's right.
Are you don't need it?
We're okay.
It's wine. I'm having a good time.
Oh, good. That's okay, this is fine. Here, Mom.
There are good seats up there too. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So anyway, first of all, welcome to the International Printing Museum. My name is Mark Barbour. I'm the Executive Director, Founding Curator of the museum. We've been kicking since 1988. We intend to kick for a lot longer, so glad you come down. How many of you, this is your first experience at the Printing Museum? Amazing. And Peter, it's probably your third or second. Somewhere in there. So, yeah, great to have you down. This is just one of the hidden wonders of Southern California, the museum is, and those that have come down here multiple times appreciate that and enjoy all the different experiences that we have here. We do lots of events throughout the year that range from working with school kids. About 20,000 school kids a year come through our programs on the history of books, printing, Benjamin Franklin, colonial America. If you've noticed right now, you're sitting underneath the different state signs. And that's one of our tours.
With the 5th graders and 8th graders is Constitution Tour, where we have them become the delegates at the Constitutional Convention. And they have to argue about what might or might not go into the Constitution. But they use the original comments from 200 years ago that are on 3x5 cards. So, and let's see, who knows, just as a little side note, how many placards are up there? How many state names are up there? How many of you say 13? How many say more than that? Those are the 4, that's for the foreigners in the audience. There we go. Now, how about less than that? 12. Only 12 of the states were at the Constitutional Convention.
Rogue Island was missing. Always late, always rebelling. So we do that. We do our educational programs. We also, in our back building, actually, you guys have tonight been experiencing doing some letterpress printing and printing from the Jo Mora blocks that we have here at the museum. But we teach classes on letterpress printing and working with wood type and cuts and images, as well as bookbinding and paper marbling and paper making, and we're getting into screen printing and other things like that. So do check out our Book Arts Institute here at the International Printing Museum. We just got that going in last year. So classes just about every week. And so, and plus we do other events throughout the year here, some public events with the general public. Our next big one you don't want to miss is October 22nd and 23rd is our Los Angeles Printers Fair. This is year number 14, and you guys will get a nice postcard on that puppy. And we have, if you picture this entire building and a giant tent between our 2 buildings out in the parking lot, we have 80 to 90 artists, vendors, printers, paper makers, demonstrations all over. It's creativity on steroids. And you get to do it, see it, talk with the artists, engage with the process, make the art yourself, and you get a fantastic place to do your shopping and unique items. In fact, one of our favorite vendors is here tonight. Janet is there. And Kupchik. That's right. And so she's usually somewhere in the spaces here. In this space right over here in the theater. So you want to come back and see her. She's an amazing letterpress artist and an instructor as well. So she teaches at the classes here. So we do lots of things, and I will give a little plug. If you ever see a printing press in the movies, it's probably from this collection. There's 200 plus movies, TV shows, commercials, all of that. Usually they come to us to get the printing equipment. And I'm involved in one right now that's going to be related to the dating game, I think, something like that, in the 70s. Some major character was involved in that. And we just finished our 2nd year with a major show with HBO, and that's called The Gilded Age. And I consider this the best show on HBO. I do not have HBO. I will not be getting HBO, but I recommend that you get HBO and get this show, because they rented the printing press that you guys were printing the Los Angeles Times newspaper press from 1881 on. That entire set was shipped out to New York twice now. And it's let's just say, helped to underwrite the operations of the museum in a very nice way. So we're hoping for 3rd, 4th, 5th season at least. This will be very, very nice. So, and if you ever see a printing press in a show, feel free to shoot us an email. Maybe it's not on our list and all that. So it's kind of fun to keep building onto that. So with that, let me
do the Tombstone Epitaph.
The series, I'm not sure. The collection here was built by our original founding collector. His name was Ernie Lindner. So he rented to the studios for 50 years, and he took meticulous, non-written paper notes. Very meticulous, and he was intentional about going to the grave with his notes. And so I got names of some of them. So some of the shows, yes, that one I'm not sure of, but Liberty Valance, Have Gum Will Travel, Bonanza, the Waltons. John Boy's press from the Waltons is right around the corner here if you want to go see his press. That's also the press used by the young boys on Newsies, the Disney musical with Christian Bale dancing on the presses and girls watching the show for 20 times. So that's the press and all. So yes, so we'll make sure you guys get a postcard and all that on the museum. And after our presentation here tonight, of course, in the back of the room, you can see some amazing Jo Mora work that's available for sale. The proceeds tonight of all the sales of those and the large map of California and of Los Angeles, the proceeds will benefit the Printing Museum as well as the Monterey Art Museum up there. So be generous. Pull out your credit card, raffle off your kid, do something, and support the museum, support Jo Mora and all. So it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Hiller, who's come down from Monterey, and this was his concept to be able to expand the world of appreciation for Jo Mora. And it's for me, that was on the outside. It's like it's something that you kind of knew about, the visual, but you don't know the richness that's there. And so he introduced us and came up with the idea of let's do a special weekend event. So we're so glad to have you here. Peter is the curator of the Jo Mora Collection. So he is in charge of Jo Mora's legacy and collection. So you're seeing this amazing original material. After the presentation too, we're printing off of Jo Mora's original printing blocks that made the maps, as well as some of the other pieces that are out there. So it's a rare opportunity to be able to experience this. And so with that, I introduce Peter Hiller. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. I want to begin, first of all, by extending some more thank yous to Mark, who just left. And to Madeline for all of the work that they're doing. There's a lot of volunteers in the room, I know, from the museum here, so I want to thank them as well.
We are streaming right now. You guys are all over the world. Carson is an important city.
So thank you to the volunteers that are here tonight, and also I think some of you will be here tomorrow along with others. George made a bunch of the engraved pieces that we are working on tonight, that the bookmarks and some of the other Jo Mora images, so thank you very much for that. And I also want to include Josh Grandow, who's right in back of George, with the cowboy hat on. So, Josh actually predates me in our mutual appreciation of Jo Mora, and it was some of Josh's early research that helped me start my research as far as Jo is concerned. And there's a couple of others, Terry Alberg, John Gilmore. Sort of the four of us are compatriots in terms of our love of Jo Mora's work. And put the four of us together and you probably couldn't ask a question that one of us couldn't answer. So, and I don't say that in a boastful way, except that it's just kind of fascinating how much information we've accumulated. So I am here on behalf of the Monterey History and Art Association, and I want to quickly give you kind of how that came to be. I have lived in the Monterey area since 1981. I was a school teacher there in elementary and middle school. I was the art teacher, small private school. And after a few years, I discovered two posters in a drawer at the school. They happened to be Jo Mora's Evolution of the Cowboy and his Indians of North America. And I was fascinated. I was an art teacher, so I had some, added interest. It wasn't just some ephemeral material that I found in a drawer. And the more and more, the longer I lived on the peninsula, the more I would see little snippets of Jo's work. And I continued to get more and more interested. And again, a lot of the research that Joss had done helped kind of guide my path in those beginning years. So I'm forever grateful for that. So the more and more I saw, the more interested I became. I finally got to a point where the light bulb went off, and I thought, I need to see a lot of material that the public hasn't seen before. And so I went to the Monterey Museum of Art, where I had good connections, and I said, what about a major retrospective exhibit of Jo Mora's art? And they said yes. So that sent me then, so imagine I'm teaching school on a full-time basis, but also I all of a sudden became a curator. And I spent 2 years organizing that exhibit at the museum. It took place in the summer of 1998. It broke the attendance records at the museum at the time, only to have been eclipsed by Ansel Adams. And I get it. So that was really my foot in the door, and I haven't closed the door behind me yet. And I just find Jo Mora to be consistently engaging, interesting. There's always new things we're discovering. In fact, 2 printing plates showed up here at the museum a couple of days ago that nobody knew, none of us anyways knew existed, and all of a sudden there they are. We'd seen the images before, but we had never seen the actual printing blocks. So that was very exciting, and that kind of thing just happens on kind of a regular basis. So that is a little bit of background about me, but I also want to tell you how we literally came to be here. So early this year, there was an exhibit at the Los Angeles Central Library in the Amundsen Gallery of Jo Mora's work. And that's an exhibit I'd been working on for a couple of years. We were totally undermined by COVID. It was supposed to happen in 2019. Of course, everything came to a screeching halt. But it did finally happen early this year, and it was curated by another person other than myself, but it was a very nice exhibit. It focused on Jo's Western art, I would say, and I came down for a couple of gallery talks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, the same day. And during the course of one of the gallery talks, a couple who are here tonight, Wendy and Tim, raise your hands, asked some questions about the printing process. And during the course of that conversation, and when we're talking about printing, we were talking about Jo's posters and what he called his carts, his different maps. And so we were just kind of casually talking about the whole 4-color process and how that all happens, and did Jo do that, and things like that. And then they said to me, well, have you ever heard of the International Printing Museum? And I said, no, I haven't. And I was embarrassed for 2 reasons. One, because I love the idea of printing. I will tell you that one of my 3 favorite smells in the whole world is printer's ink. And that goes back to junior high school for me when I was in junior high school, and I took a print shop class that I absolutely loved. I became friends with the teacher outside of school. I went river rafting with him. I mean, I just loved print shop. And I still love that smell to this day. So that was part of the conversation. I didn't know about the museum, and they introduced me to it, and all the bells and whistles and lights start going off for me. Okay, we got to do something. I got to find out more about this. And so here we are. It happened. And Mark was very gracious, Madeline, in saying yes to this whole idea. And I've been waiting for tonight for a really long time. And I'm just thrilled that it's actually here. I said to my wife a couple days ago, this has been on my mind in a good way, for months. And I'm thrilled that it's finally here, and I thank you all for coming. and participating, and we're here tonight. You have the honor of hearing this presentation. I won't be doing that tomorrow, but I'm going to read one of Joe's children's books a couple times tomorrow, and we have all the activities that you started partaking in already. So that's a little bit of background. Again, I'm thrilled that Wendy and Tim are here again. So I mean, it was started out as a very casual conversation, and it led to this wonderful event. So, now, about our star, Jo Mora. What I want to do is just give you a pretty brief background about Jo Mora. One of the things that I always do, I speak about Jo whenever I'm asked, and I don't charge to do it. And it's actually, I've done it over 100 times, which is, again, just, I've been doing it for a long time and I love it. And it's for all kinds of organizations, history organizations, the California Map Society. I do it for Kiwanis Club, and anybody that asks that needs a speaker and they find out about me, I say yes. So I love doing it, and I would say every time I've done it, I've changed it based on the circumstances and where it is and who I'm speaking to. And again, tonight's is fresh, new, different. I haven't done this presentation before. And I thought it was most appropriate to focus on Los Angeles. So, and I always love to kind of, in my own mind, challenge myself, pick a word, and then I find an association with Jo Mora that's connected to that word. Well, so there is clearly a Los Angeles chapter in Jo's life. It's one of many chapters, though. So my slight, I don't regret's maybe a little too strong a word, but my hesitation always is that when I do a presentation, I know clearly that it is only a chapter. No matter how I approach it, it doesn't cover his expansive career. So anyways, tonight's kind of focus is Los Angeles. But before we get to Los Angeles, I want to introduce you to his family. His father, Domingo, was a classical sculptor. His brother, Luis, was a classical painter. In fact, his painting of President Harding is in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. His mother kept the whole family together, and she's right there in the middle, Laura. And this is Jo laying down with the family dog. Jo seemed to always have dogs, even as an adult, and his own family. And so this is probably when he was, I'd say 18 or so. He was actually born in Uruguay. They lived there for only a couple of years before they went back briefly to Spain. Jo's dad was Catalan, his mother was French, so he spoke those languages. He spoke Spanish, he spoke obviously English. He learned from school Latin and Greek, so he was multilingual as an adult. And so this picture would have been taken when they were still all living together on the East Coast. And then we jump to California, and this is Jo with his immediate family, so his wife and his 2 children. I had the pleasure of knowing his son, Joey, Jo Jr., and that goes back to the days of that initial museum exhibit, and I knew actually from Joss's book the name of one of the Mora family's lawyers, who happened to be on the founding board of the Children's Museum in Monterey with me. And so I had a perfect introduction besides the Jo Mora connection. The other lawyer was a parent of students of mine, so it all just kind of fit together very easily and naturally. But this is when the Moras had moved down to the Carmel area. They moved in about 1920. And the kids, you get a sense of their age there, and that's where the family lived for the rest of each of their 4 lives. Jo passed away in 1947. He was born in 1876, so led a nice life. And again, I thought, what better to start off with a talk about Los Angeles and/or California than the California quail, and also the grizzly giant, which was in the news recently because it almost caught on fire. The fire burned all around it, fortunately. That's a drawing of the grizzly giant that Joe did in 1903 based on time he spent in Yosemite. The quail is not dated, but I've always thought that it predated his coming to California, even though the subject is a California quail. But I wanted you also to see how gifted he was as a painter. So you've got two approaches, and as we go through these slides, I won't necessarily always mention it, but keep in mind the different mediums that you're seeing that he uses, and his proficiency with those mediums. It's quite striking. You know. And in fact, he designed a coin. This is the California Jubilee 1925 50-cent piece. Speaking of etching, there is a photograph of Joe with the clay, or it would have been, clay piece that he used for the actual carving of this that was the size of a big dinner plate, but that it ended up being cast as a 50-cent piece. And then we'll go back to 1903. So Joe spends most of his early life on the East Coast. His working career begins as an illustrator for the Boston Herald newspaper. These are the days before photographs were used as illustrations, because that technology did not exist yet. So the editor would, hear about some situation. They'd say, Joe, go down to 5th and Maple and do a drawing of whatever the scene of the crime is, or the accident, or the news event. And so he would go and do drawings. And those would then become the illustrations in the newspaper. He then also went on to do a number of book illustrations, particularly for children's books. And editors in those days would, every so often, they would republish a book that had already been published, but they would put new illustrations in it just to create, hopefully, a new audience and additional sales. And so Joe illustrated a lot of books at the same time that he was working for the Herald. All along, he, as a child, and I didn't include any of these, but he is writing stories about what I'm going to call cowboys and Indians, even though it may not be politically correct, but that's the way he referred to it, and that's the way I grew up. It doesn't make it right, but anyways. He wrote stories, he illustrated those stories, and the miracle is that his mother kept all of that material. So in the Jo Mora collection is a wonderful selection of notebooks, 5-cent notebooks that Joe has filled with stories and pictures. It is a researcher's dream come true. It's the best primary source material you could ever ask for. So that was his early working life. But during that time, and that interest in the American cowboy, the vaqueros, his father had an interest in the gauchos of South America. In fact, that's why he initially moved the family there. And then Joe gets wind of Buffalo Bill Cody in the Wild West show, and he actually meets Buffalo Bill Cody briefly. And so all of this is churning, and he gets this sense, he has a sense that the American West is changing. And again, so we're talking the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was. Population shifts were taking place. People were migrating from the East Coast to the West. And he was interested in the indigenous people and had this sense that if he didn't go see it for himself, it would be changed beyond recognition. So he had in mind to go see the Hopi snake dance, particularly. That was his specific goal in going to Arizona. He comes to California, takes a train out, goes through Chicago, across the country, comes to California, and he settles for a time in the San Ynez Valley, right outside of, over the San Marcos Pass from Santa Barbara. And he realizes that his timing is off to go back to Arizona to see the snake dance. So he's going to have to wait another 4 seasons. And it doesn't follow our calendar. It's more of a based on seasons for the Hopi as to when they do the snake dance. So he's got time in California. Well, he spends some of the time riding the El Camino Real. So he ends up in the San Ynez Valley. He's on the Donahue Ranch there. He's witnessing the vaqueros and all their horsemanship skills. He is learning them himself. I mean, he ends up being a cowboy amongst everything else, because it's not just book learning for him. He actually learns it and can do it. And then so he's got this time. He needs to hang out, and he thinks, okay, well, I want to see the historic missions of California. So he gets his horse, Lady, who you'll see in a moment. He rides over the San Marcos Pass down to Santa Barbara, gets on a boat with Lady. They sail down to San Diego, turns around, and rides back north all the way up to San Juan Bautista, the mission there. So he didn't go all the way to the, to the northernmost missions, but he went to almost all of them. And so picture 1903, Joe's on horseback. He's got a saddle. He has a bedroll. He maybe has a change of clothes. In his saddlebags, he has a sketch pad and a watercolor set. He has a journal that he is meticulously making entries into. Again, we have this incredible primary source material that still exists, thank goodness, and thanks to the family. So one of the stops was the San Gabriel mission, which is the one pictured here. And he ends up getting married there, not that long after that. So that's the marriage announcement. So this is 1903. He got married in January of 1907. And in between, I'll fill in some of the details. And here's another view of the San Fernando mission. And it's sort of deceiving. Well, actually, here, let me get in the way here. That happens to be the one right on the top of the pile. That is the actual size from his notebook, his sketch pad. Wow. And the actual color of the paper, the stack of paper that was out near one of the presses reminded me of, used to be able to go to the drugstore and buy a stack of paper and you get 10 sheets of blue and 10 of yellow and 10 of green. Well, this sketchbook was like that. Not the same colors, but the same variety of colors. So this was printed as a Giclée print in exactly the size that it existed in the sketchbook. Wow. And you notice too, so here, I think I'm pretty convinced he was working with gouache at this time, which is like a watercolor, except it's not transparent like a watercolor is. And so it gives you a little deeper colors. And then if you think back to the previous picture, that was done just in black. So he uses a variety of different materials here. This one is pen and ink. This is Lady. I told you I promised you'd get to see Lady. And so there's a whole variety of pictures that he did. And so you have to picture him on horseback, riding north by himself. In between, the missions were laid out theoretically in a day's ride. And he would get to a mission and he would stop. One of my favorite quotes is, I think it was the San Diego mission, and he sat down on a rock to start sketching, and he goes, "This is just a great deal, except for these damn flies are driving me crazy." He loses Lady at some point around Camp Pendleton, and it takes him about 4 pages to find Lady, but he does. And then this was another one of the pieces in this collection, in these 2 sketchbooks. And when I saw this painting had always kind of given me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, there was just something about the guy that, I don't know, it just didn't look very much like a person. And I'm thinking, so I saw this for a while, and I thought, well, maybe Joe just wasn't that good at portraits, until I found a photograph that matched it. so what do I know? So it's just like, it's spitting image. So I have not been able to figure out which mission this was done, but, you know. And then right around that same, actually, this was after going to Arizona, and I'll digress a minute from Los Angeles. But during that time, he was waiting to go to the snake dance. He also went up to the Sierras for a while, and he contemplated panning for gold as a way to make a living. He decided not to do that, but he did do some nice artwork while he was up there. I didn't include that in this, but then he did go to Arizona, and he spent almost 3 years there, living with the Hopi and the Navajo, and it is probably my favorite chapter in his life, is the time he spent with the Hopi. And he got, I describe it as him going there with an open heart, and he went there and he lived there, and he rented a house from Nampeo, who some of you will know as one of the first named Hopi potters. And he was there with E.A. Burbank, who was another American artist, and the two of them became good friends. So he had an incredible time there, and he did some fantastic artwork while he was there. But he got to a point after almost 3 years where he wrote to his parents and he said, if I don't leave today, I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. And remember, we saw that he got married. His love interest was back in the San Jose area in California. He did leave very shortly after they got married in Ocean Park, next to Venice here in LA, and then lived there for just a little short period of time before they moved up to the Mountain View area south of San Francisco. But while he was here, he did sign Loomis's autograph book, which is at the LA Library, the Central Library, and illustrated it handsomely. And he then started the generation of some ideas for artwork. And at this point, his father has come west as well, around the same years. So this is the Palace Theater on Broadway. Oh, there it says that up there. That's good. And I'm going to skip to the next picture because it shows you the artwork that they did there. And this is still there today. There's several buildings downtown LA. You could do a very efficient little walking tour and see Joe's work that is still there from this time period. So here he celebrates the Muses, and that's a pretty consistent theme of his. Right? He allegedly worked with Julia Morgan on the Examiner building. I wish I had better documentation of that relationship than I do, but I believe I've read enough references to believe that it happened, that they did work together. The last time I was at this building, which is further south towards what's pretty close to where the Staples Center is now, I think, it had been kind of redeveloped as a film studio, maybe kind of thing, something I had to sneak in to try to get some idea what was going on inside. But anyways, but I do think they worked together on that. And there's enough work on the building that would have been in the style of Joe that it is convincing. Then we go back up Broadway till we get to 6th and the Pacific Mutual building, where you see, and let me see if I have a close-up. Yes, I do. Okay. So I'm going to go back here. But if you notice above the front entrance, the sculptural piece that's right above the door, and that is enlarged over on the right. So that's another piece, and that, in fact, is still there as well. Well, in fact, wait. Yes, that's still there. And I thought it was interesting to include this working diagram from the Gladdy McBean Company, which is up near Sacramento. They did a lot of Joe's work when it comes to these architectural decorative pieces that were on a heroic, what I call a heroic scale, meaning in a lot of cases larger than life size. So that piece is still there. And then this is the $1 Million Theater, which is kind of over the Central Market, right there at the corner, 3rd and Broadway. And the decorative elements of this are so intricate. They're just amazing. And they are on 2 sides of the building. I thought it was kind of interesting that there's some close-ups. Again, he uses the muses on this top, and those are 2 of only 4. A lot of bison heads on the building, but very, very ornate, detailed work. And speaking of things being used in movies, as the presses are here, I happened to find this. I was doing some really in-the-weeds research, and this is the $1 Million Theater building that was the background for the Silent Man movie. And then we come to the Los Angeles Athletic Club, which still is housed in the it's currently in the same building it has been. You can see, again, the circle, that's where it's situated above the door. And then if you look over on the right, it's more of a detail. And I think it had to do with earthquake safety, but they took this down, and nobody that I've been able to talk to knows what happened to it. And I'm afraid it might have been a combination of it was deteriorating and they were worried it was going to fall apart, but I'm afraid it ended up in the garbage. So, at least we have photographs. Then we skip a little ways away over to Arcadia, and this is a small building that was used by the local newspaper in Arcadia. Jo did the architectural design. So we've got a person who's been doing decorative work, but here he designs the whole building in this Art Deco style. And that building, I think, is still there as well. And this one's not on a lot of the Jo Mora lists, but. And then we find Jo here, surrounded by friends and other artists in the Bohemian Club. Well, Jo, once he came back to California after being in Arizona and they moved up to the Bay Area, his membership in the Bohemian Club was paramount to his future artistic success in terms of the people he met and the commissions he got as a result of those people. So it was a really important, and Jo knew enough that he was really motivated to get membership, and he succeeded in that. But it was a very important step in his career, including meeting Earl C. Anthony. This is the Earl C. Anthony estate in Los Feliz Hills. Does anybody else know? Oh, I already wrote that part down there. So Earl C. Anthony, so wait a second. Why is his estate in Los Angeles and they're meeting up in San Francisco? Earl C. Anthony was one of the founders of the whole notion of gas stations and placing them along the road so you could travel from one place to another. And so that, and Anthony was a member of Bohemian Club as well. So this is an example of one of the Los Angeles connection. So Jo did this mantelpiece. Subject matter, Canterbury Tales, and that's a recurring theme for Jo in his work. And so this is the mantelpiece over a very large fireplace that is in the Sisters of Immaculate Heart of Mary building. Does anybody know what happened to that building? Well, there's Katy Perry tried to buy this building, and she tried and tried and tried, and she just wanted it for a residence. I mean, the Sisters of Mary it was an organization that was kind of seen its better days. There were not getting any new members, and the nuns it was just kind of slowly kind of fading away. However, there were a couple of sisters who were lucid enough that when they discovered it was Katy Perry and who she was and what she sang about, they said, there's no way we're selling that building to her. So it is actually in litigation. And I don't know if it's the last time I checked in with the lawyer who was representing her, which I nerdishly do every once in a while, just out of curiosity. But it is, the building is still there. Joe's work is still there. I've made it very clear to the lawyer that this is an important piece of art, and no matter what happens in the future, it should be preserved. So if nothing else, that I hope will happen. Another picture of it, and then with a little bit of text. For a while, the mantelpiece was covered with an altar, so that it was hard to get pictures of it. But, and then I'll come back. There we go. And then the first of Joe's 2 carts of California. This one's 1927. This is one of the first carts that he did, but it celebrates the whole state of California, and I just wanted to use this as an introduction to that part of his career. He's probably most well known as a cartographer and a map maker. There's a couple of reasons, I think. One is that these were produced 1,000 at a time, and at the time they could have been sold for 50 cents. So, even if you weren't affluent, you still maybe could afford, something like that. And they were highly engaging. These are part of what's called pictorial maps, and they tell stories. Joe was not the only one doing this kind of work, but there were several other people around the same time, and I've always wondered if they knew each other, but we're working in that same style. But what's interesting is that you can always identify whose is whose. Ruth Taylor White was another one. She does wonderful pictorial maps in a similarly humorous manner to Joe's, but they're side by side. You would always be able to tell his from hers. So they developed their own style, and it's a wonderful history book about the state of California, and they require very close inspection. One of the things I love about them when they're on display is people stop and they look, and then they walk away, and then they come back, and then they come back again, because there's so much information in these. I use the analogy, it's like reading a book before you go to bed. There's just so much more to it, and more pages to turn. It's the same thing with looking at these. And we haven't left the greater Los Angeles area yet. If you've been to the Will Rogers home in the Pacific Palisades, Joe did a series of dioramas that were about Will Rogers and his life. There were 13 of them. Each one of them depicted a different period in Will Rogers' life. But what I love about what I'm going to show you is that we start with a photograph that was taken of the interior of the ranch house. Then we move to Joe's sketch of what he proposed as the subject of what was going to be the diorama. And then we see the actual diorama. And these are still in Claremore, Oklahoma. They're very treasured by the Will Rogers Memorial site there. And I want to show you one more slide, because what I love is that you get a sense now of the scale of them. And they varied, but this would probably one of the larger ones. And when it was finished, it would have been housed a little more tightly with a background painted on it. But this I love because it just gives you a sense of the scale. And then we come to Joe's second cart of California, 1945. And this is one of the images that we're going to be printing this weekend. The black plate of the 4 color plates belongs to Joss, and so we're kind of co-hosting this weekend in a way, because the Los Angeles one has, I think I put that in there, but this is what we're going to be printing, and I think it's a good time to show you as the audience, but when this is printed here now, the California title is not present. And so that would have had to have been printed at a later date. And I don't know why that is, because it could have been just done in black, but or in any of the, well, in fact, the reason it doesn't show on this plate is because it was done in one of the colors. So that you'll see that on the one that's in the back. So it doesn't exist on the black plate that we have to print. But again, the focus on Los Angeles, this is really California, but I love the way he deals with Nevada, where the top half is really the history of people in California, starting with the indigenous people, and it's titled The Melting Pot, and it goes all the way through to the end of the third line is modern day, at the time people, and then he traces the whole history through changes in transportation. So that's the lower half of that as well. Just amazing. He has people surfing, which there were not a lot of surfers in 1945. So that was, that's the kind of person he didn't miss a beat.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Were these commissioned by someone, or?
Thank you for asking that. There's about 13 different carts that Joe did. And I won't go through all 13 stories, but almost every map has a different story. And basically what happened is that once he started, well, one of our colleagues has a childhood drawing that Joe did of the continent of Europe. So it would have been a grade school assignment to do a map of Europe. Then there's a book that Joe illustrated where the end papers are the Monterey Peninsula. So, and then shortly after that, he did a couple of maps for Samuel Morris, who at the time owned the Hotel Del Monte in Monterey and eventually owned Pebble Beach Corporation and Pebble Beach. So he did those for him. So what happened was, and then he did 3 national parks. He did Yosemite, Yellowstone, and the Grand Canyon. He did, I put his 2 posters in the same category. And what happened was, in some cases they were commissions, so he was paid to do them and gave the rights to whoever paid him. In others, that was a family decision, and I think, for example, the national parks initially were, Joey said to his dad, Joey became his father's sort of business person, if you will, and was a real champion of his father's creativity. And Joey would, say, well, Dad, if you make me, this Indian cart, I'll take it to Arizona and I'll go to the trading post and I'll sell it. And in fact, he did. He did that on a number of occasions. And keep in mind, some of this time period was during the Depression. And so the income the family created as a result of this kept them housed during the Depression, which was really important. So they do have different stories. The 2 California pieces, I'm not totally sure about the first one. This one I think he did for the family. This one is smaller in terms of inches than the first one, and I also have always sort of thought that the first one's quite large, and I've always sort of thought that people didn't have room in their house for it. It was kind of so big. So it occurred to me that, well, maybe he did the second one on a smaller scale, so it's more manageable, and you'll see it back there. So you get a sense of the full size. But again, just sort of speculating. But he includes the missions, and there's so much information again in these that's just fascinating. A couple of other images of California. This is not as well known. This was an illustration in a book that Joe created called The Log of the Spanish Main. And it was something he did for passengers on the Graceline shipping, it was like a cruise ship. And it was it's not fair to say an empty journal. It was a journal designed with visual and textual prompts for the passengers to then fill out the rest of the information themselves. And so it includes maps of the places where the ship stopped. There's a whole section at the back about pirates and biographies about different pirates. So it was a very engaging piece. So that predated his full-on piece of Los Angeles, that's the other one that we have here to be printing. And there's also a couple of those in full color in the back too, so you can get to see it, but I think I have a picture. I do, okay. So this one is just, I've always loved this one. The colors are so much more vibrant than the other ones. And what I thought was interesting, and again, I have the privilege of access to this archive, so I found the pencil drawing that creates the decorative border. Then we see the close-up of the decorative border, and then, here we found it here. But a woman that I know who lives back east wrote an annotated version of just this cart. And it's probably 150 pages. And she literally started at the top corner and went through the entire cart, and every vignette she researched and then wrote a paragraph about what it was and why it was there and stuff. It's a wonderful companion piece to the map. But the map is just so engaging, and it speaks volumes just about Los Angeles at that time. And so it's a really wonderful piece. And you'll notice a little detail of Santa Catalina Island there. And then we go to this, which Joe, in fact, started a map about Santa Catalina. And this one's interesting because it's the only one that there's any evidence of that wasn't finished. So what was discovered at the home of Joe Jr. was this was rolled up in a basement, and it is pencil drawing on a piece of tracing paper. So and I would say, based on the empty spaces, that it's about 80% finished. It's hard to know, but there's certain bits of certain icons, like for example, the buffalo are there. So we know the buffalo were taken to Catalina for a movie production and then left behind. So we could date it by that. The Great White Steamship is featured, so we could date it by that. So and Wrigley, the Cubs are there as a baseball team. So there's some things that you could, if you really sat down, the casino buildings there, if you really sat down, you could probably pinpoint approximately when this was done. And in fact, also on the left edge, that decorative border is very similar to the Los Angeles border, and different than any of the other carts. So I'm thinking it was the 40s, but I'm not sure. And then the interesting thing too is to speculate why it wasn't finished. I mean, was it a commission that fell through? Did Joe? It was not high enough on his list of priorities. Did he run out of time? If it was the 40s, he had a lot of big projects going on in the 40s, very time-consuming, and so maybe it just didn't rise to the level of finishing it. But fortunately, we have that pencil drawing, and it also speaks to his process, which I love. So here he is. He starts. This is, what we know could be a finished piece, and he starts on pencil on a piece of tracing paper. And we have a photograph of him working on a different one of the carts, and he's using a fine black ink marker or pen to start adding the black lines to it. And so we begin to, put those ideas together and get a sense of the process that he went through. And I'm going to consider Catalina close enough to Los Angeles. And I would be remiss not to mention his books. Amongst being an incredibly talented visual artist, he was a great writer and author. These are the first two books he did. They were published in the 40s. Trail Dust and Saddle Leather is about the American cowboy. Californio is about the California vaqueros. He intended a third book. It was going to be called Gauchos, and so it would have been a trilogy, and that would have focused on the gauchos of South America. He wrote a draft of a couple of the first chapters. He did a couple of drawings, but he never got a chance to finish it before he passed away. And in fact, Californios was not published. He finished it. He did all the artwork and in both the books, but he did all the artwork, the drawings in Californios, finished the text, but he passed away before it was actually published. So his son, I mean, it was kind of in the works, and so his son Joey finished that up, stuff, the publication. And I've mentioned these already, but these are probably the two pieces Joe's most well known for, again, because they've been published in terms of more copies, and they've got legs, as they say. I mean, they've really lasted, and inevitably, if you mention Jo Mora to somebody, they're going to recognize the name because of one of these two posters. And then, if you get kind of fanatical about the whole thing, this leads to this, 25 years later. In fact, interesting too, maybe, that, in answer to your question about how these came to be, the evolution of the cowboy was originally done for the Salinas Rodeo. And so it's dated 1933, and that was the original work on Joe's part, but he sold that to the rodeo. Well, somehow, pretty quickly, the family realized this was too good to give up, and so they really gave it away. And then what Joe realized is that if he changed it, he could keep it. The family could keep, that rights to the new version. So if you look near the top, the yellow backgrounds with the black silhouettes, in the original 33 edition, there's two small little maps up there. So it's also a good way to date what you see or which version you might have. So that was the original 33. Then a few years later, Joe did this version, and this is the version that's been republished over the years repeatedly. I think Joe's love of his time in Arizona spoke to his wanting to do the companion piece, The Indians of North America. A lot of the vignettes on that one were his own personal possessions that he acquired while he lived in Arizona, which is pretty cool. And so, and it's just a fan. Both pieces are worthy of reading in bed. Evolution of the Cowboy made its way into California Magazine as a fold-out. It also made its way onto the cover of the Birds album that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I found this on a wall in a restaurant at Joshua Tree, but they had framed the Birds album and the Sweetheart of the Rodeo, or Rodeo. If you live in Salinas, you have to say Rodeo, but I say Rodeo. That album cover is another, major touch point for Joe in terms of people knowing his work, and they see it. And what I always loved about that, and I've actually, I think this came about after Joe had died. So Jo Mora Jr. was the business negotiator for the Birds album. But what I've always loved about that is that it credits Jo Mora on the back of the album as the illustrator, which that doesn't happen very often, and so I've always appreciated that. And it made it onto the wall in Beaver Cleaver's bedroom. So if you look there up in the upper right-hand corner, that's the Indians of North America poster. And I'm sure most all of you remember Leave It to Beaver. And there we go. And let me just put, take 2 more minutes just to put some of what you're surrounded by in a context. I brought a lot of material that belongs to the Monterey History and Art Association, so anything you're inclined to buy, those proceeds go to them. We're also sharing some of the proceeds with the Printing Museum. Josh brought some things too. He brought a little higher end in terms of older, more vintage pieces than I did. But we're tonight and tomorrow, we're special 2-time only opportunity to print the California black version, black plate, and the Los Angeles black plate for $45 tonight and tomorrow. And then after I leave here on Saturday, the price goes up to $146, which is how old Joe will be this month. And so I couldn't figure out how to price it. That's what I came up with. So it will go up. So we have printers proofs today and tomorrow. And the other tag for when I leave is that it'll be a limited edition and numbered, but the price goes up too. So I think Madeline has got the square, or is going to be doing. Oh, here we go. We're going to have a little tour. Oh, if you turn around, you get to see the. Yeah. Oh, good.
So we are printing tonight.
So we are printing tonight 2 of the cards. One is Los Angeles. The other one is we just started the California one. So literally the first print was right in the middle of your talk. I was out there listening, printing, and going. So these are the original plates from the printer. And I think the printer, we don't know exactly who it was. We have a little bit of a lead on who it is.
I think Robertson, I think.
Robertson in San Francisco.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think yes.
And so these are, we're about to, George Bush, who is one of our volunteers at the museum, will give a talk in just a second about how these plates were actually made from Joe's artwork. But Peter, if you'd lift that, go and look. I know it's heavy, but you're a young man, you can do this.
Not that young.
Yeah. Turn around to the back there. You might be interested to see if you can turn the back of the print, of the plate. What's amazing is how stable, the wood is, that this printed beautifully on the presses here. So, I mean, yesterday I'm printing almost for the first time on them, and they're doing fantastic.
That's an end block panel.
So George is mentioning there that's an end block panel, which is
going different directions.
Yeah.
2 animals are going across, and in the middle, that's what keeps.
2 are going across, one's going in the middle. Turn it around there again, Peter, if they can see that. No, turn the block around. There you go.
The grain on it is top and the bottom.
So the grain is on the top and the bottom, and
the middle's going up and down.
the middle's going up and down.
That keeps it from warping.
Yeah. Peter's one of our younger volunteers here, and employees at the museum, and
Mark is maybe is figuratively the old man, but
yeah.
I'm literally.
So anyway, so we're about to start printing the other block right now, but so tonight your special is to get a printer's proof that is not going to be numbered. The edition itself is only going to be 23. That's going back up to Monterey for the Monterey Art Association, and so it's your chance to get it relatively cheap, and it benefits both the organizations. But we'll even let you print it yourself. You see how hard it is to get the right pressure and everything else. So just beautiful, and then you can frame it and tell all your friends all about Jo Mora and all. So
just to fill in too, excuse me. This is the black ink plate in the archive. Again, the thrill of people saving things. I have the other 3 colors, so I've got the magenta, the yellow, and cyan.
hold on one second, Peter. That one's cheaper. We're making sure we're on the microphone because we are live tonight, so we have friends all across the country and the world, so I'm sure they're listening to us.
Okay. So I was just saying that in the archive, we do have the other 3 plates, and we decided, since that's already been printed and it already has a collector's value, that it would be fun to do just the black versions. And so I brought the Los Angeles black plate down. Joss owns the California black plate, And we don't quite know how this happened, but Joss has 2 of the plates for California, and the archive has 2. We have no idea how they became separated, but they're in the family. So we have those together. And
another side of that story is that when Peter came down and talked about this whole idea of doing this evening, of course, we want to get right into printing and making it come alive. And, you know, he mentions he has the 4 plates, and we said, no, we're not printing 4 plates. So that ended that really quick, and we said, oh, it'd be much better to have a collector's edition of 1 plate. That would be much better. So that you understand why there's 4 plates is printers print with process color. So we take the colors you see and we interpret that into 4 colors. It goes on the camera, graphic arts printer's camera. We filter out 4 colors: black, yellow, cyan, which is a light blue, and then a light red, which is known as magenta. And when you meld those all back together again, it now starts, it looks like all the colors you see. So those beautiful color carts, the maps, are 4 colors of ink. But you see everything else. So it's like an illusion. It's a magic trick. It all blends together. You know.
The analogy that I use is when we were all little and we got really close to our TV sets, and if you got really close to your TV, you saw those little pixels in those 4 colors. And that's the same idea that's used for the printing process.
So, and George is about to come up and give a talk about...
Just a question.
Your question.
Now, how was that art created? He drew the illustration, and
so the question there is...
colorized on top of it. It was a colored print that he hand cut.
Yeah. So Peter, hold on 1 second. Let me clarify this question for the online audience. So the question is, how did he create the artwork that went in front of the camera? Did he just create a full color work that was then interpreted? It goes on a scanner and separates the colors, or was it like the line art and then the other colors were added?
Both. We have.
Politician.
Yeah, we have evidence that there's a wonderful photograph of Joe sitting on a chair with the Indians of North America on an easel, and he's about halfway down adding color to it. So it would have started, I think, as a pencil drawing, as we talked about. He then would have gone over it in black ink, you know, to make the fine lines, and then he added the color to it. So that then would have had to be separated, as it was ended up full color. It would have had to be separated and then printed in 4 passes on the press.
All right. So as a clarity on that, so he's basically creating full color artwork as an artist, and then that's placed in front of a graphic arts camera, and then we create, as printers, we create the separation, which George will mention to you in just a second. So we have in front of the camera the full color drawn, painted artwork, the colored artwork, and then we separate out the cyan, the magenta, the yellow, and the black, and make 4 printing plates, and they mount it on. Yes?
How long ago did that process, when did that process begin?
The process of the camera is beginning around 1890, okay? And the first ability to print a photograph in a newspaper was 1888. It was in New York. It's an image called Shantytown, which sounds like, you know, the rich and wealthy. So the first illustration of a photograph in a paper showed you know, people living in shacks in New York, and it was a halftone image. And so they figured out how to take, and to give an understanding of the challenge that we have as printers is we have an ink on the press, and usually what color is that ink?
Black.
Black. And so if you look at a photograph, what do you see? Grays. You see literally, if you are honest, it's thousands of grays. Well, we have black ink. How do you print gray with black ink? And so it was discovered, Frederick Ives figured this out in the 19th century. He basically put the image on a camera, and the image passed with light through a screen, and it interpreted the lights and the darks into a size of a dot. So a small dot with a lot of white space on it is a light gray. A big dot is a dark gray. So now you can interpret a black and white photograph by halftone, by dots, instead of continuous tone, a photograph. And then it gives the illusion, if you stand back far enough, it looks like all the lights and grays that you see, or all the colors. When they came across the ability to print colors, they figured out those 4 process colors, and they mixed the dots together, and when you stand back far enough, your eye blends it. The best example to see this really up close is a billboard. So, but when you're driving by a billboard, you're at 60 mile, LA, you're at 30 miles per hour, and you don't see the dots. If you see the dots on a billboard, you're in trouble. Because you're on the billboard. You went too fast on that curve. So, all right, so anyway, so these are, by the way, so after the presentation here, we're going to be printing some more. I'm going to start up on the California plates. They're all available here in the back. If you want to purchase one, you got to come in here and see Madeline over at the table. She'll take your credit card, your gold bullion, your small children, anything else that we need to do. All works out well. And lots of other good things. And we also have other original work from Jo Mora that's available, especially for the collectors in the group there. And what else beyond that? Oh, and by the way, when you get something like this, the ink is wet. You can do this all you want. The ink will still be wet. We're entertained by you walking around doing this, but the ink is wet. So get it down, place it somewhere flat, and let it dry. It's going to take about 5 hours to 8 hours to dry, and then you'll do fine and all. Okay. So with that, and I'd like George just come up really quick, and he's going to show you the process of making photo engravings. So thank you guys for coming up here. Bring you guys down. And this process of making these plates, our friend here, George Bush, who's one of our lead volunteers here at the museum, he's 3rd generation plate maker. His company, and he's been involved in the companies for 3 generations that have been making these metal plates that the printers use, and we're actually still making them today, even though this is yesterday. Well, yeah, he was making these plates here this morning. They're still used in the printing industry today, both by the artists who do like the antique style of printing, letterpress and book arts, but also it's used for things like making rubber stamps, to making molds and dies and all sorts of things. So.
Stamping all the shiny material in the cosmetic boxes and stuff to make a plate to do that. That's what making transfers are for. But everything has to start, like the big plate that we had here. You'd have to get a negative of the image, so they would photograph that image. Photograph the picture on a big camera, large camera. We have cameras that are 17 feet long. Have a copy board that'll hold a 30 by 40 piece of artwork. And we can make it smaller or larger by moving the lenses and the copy board back and forth. But initially you have to come out with a negative of the image that you're trying to produce. And on the 4-color stuff, they would have to separate that copy on the camera. In those days, there were no scanners, so it was all done manually with filters, colored filters through the lens. And they would continuously tone the separations and get those separations, and then they would have to screen those separations to print it.
Screening is putting the dots on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about several steps to get to the point where you have dots that are printable on the press.
And the screen is like 2 pieces of glass that are ruled, scribed with lines per inch, say 133 lines per inch going this direction, and another piece of glass with 133 lines scribed going this direction. They're laminated together, and they give you like a window screen. And each one of those holes is a little lens in the camera in front of the film. And as the light goes from the copy through the camera lens, it projects onto the screen, and the amount of light that passes through that area that it's imaging produces a little dot on the film. So each one of those holes is a little lens in itself. So it takes the light then back, and if a lot of light goes through it, projects a larger dot. If no light goes through it, like in a black area, it doesn't reflect any light, there's no dot. So we have to force a dot on there. So we actually put a light in front of the lens and flash expose to get that tiny dot in the, which ends up being a white dot in a black area. And that's the screening process. But to move on.
Just to let you know, there is one of those graphic arts cameras. If you think of Ansel Adams behind a giant wooden camera, and you poured steroids on it, that's our camera. And there's one on the other side of the museum up on the balcony level. You can actually
The
see.
lenses are about that big around, you know, they're used. And our film is very slow. It's not a high-speed film, like your camera film. The exposure's minuscule. Ours can take 20, 30 seconds of light going through. But to move on. So, if those plates were made, the metal would have to be scrubbed and cleaned, the surface, with pumice. The plate would come as a thin plate, but it had no coating on it, or a resist, they call it. So the red top that you see there is the resist. So we would have to clean the plate, flow the coating on by hand, put it in a whirler, spin off the excess, and with a little burner at the bottom, heat a very thin coating onto the plate, which is now light sensitive. We would have to handle it in subdued light. Then we would take the negative and put that on top of the plate, which had the coating didn't have any color in those days. It was just a clear amberish coating. It had no color like this. We put the negative on, pull a vacuum, and suck all the air out between a glass and a backing and a piece of glass, pull all the air out, have negative right in contact with that, expose a high ultraviolet light to it, like 5,000 watts of sunlight, and it exposes the coating. And like a piece of film, then it comes out, it still doesn't have the image on it, it's just red. And we dip it in a tank of solution and develop it up, dipping it in and out.
That solution is what?
What?
What's the solution made of?
I don't know now. Caustic soda, you know. And it rinses off everything that isn't your image, goes away. Now you still have a plate that has no relief. You can't print from that. There's no relief. It's not standing up. So then we have to take that image, that plate, and then put it into a machine that has acid in it, and the paddles, and a tank, and a lid. And we put the plate on the lid, and clamp it in, close the lid, and it's hanging upside down in the tank. And when we turn the machine on, the paddles pick up the solution of acid and chemistry and flow it over the plate. As the plate's on the lid spinning around, it's going in a circuit, it's spinning and moving orbitally like this so that you get an even distribution. It can't be static in there, otherwise it's hitting the same place every time, so that's kind of moving. Then when it comes out, we have a relief plate. Everything that isn't the image has now been eaten away chemically. We're chemical engravers. We're not engravers. We're photo engravers. And we don't engrave photos, which a lot of people call us. Can you engrave on this photo? But we're photo engravers because we photo mechanically put your image on the plate. And if you left it in there longer, it would get deeper. You could etch right through this if you wanted to. But we don't usually do that. We try it. So this is
unless it's Friday.
And the plates that we have here, that's a very thin, it's called 16 gauge, it's 64 thousandths thick. And the wood that we get is milled to accept this wood metal and become type high, which is, everybody know what type high is? Most everybody in here? That's the height of that lead type out in the log. So if in a newspaper they would lock this picture up with the headline right below it, and we would all print at the same time. And in the old days, now that plate that you have there from Jo Mora, there was no glue on the wood. It was just a piece of wood. And it probably wasn't even milled planing the correct height. They have planers in the shops. We had a planer, and you would plane both sides of the wood to get it to the right spec. Nowadays, with high-grade milling they have now, we order it at a certain height and we get it that height. And it has a glue on it. That's heat activated, and we glue the plate on like that. In the old days, if you notice on that plate, it's all nailed in place. There's a bevel around the outside where that's nailed in and into the middle. And we have special machines for doing nailing. It's where old cobbler's tools. If you want to, in a shoe repair place, you'll see the cobbler has that little foot that puts the heel on and nails the heel. Well, we have that nailing machine adapted to our purpose with a flat plane, so we can put the plate under it and hit the pedal and drive it in, so we don't have to go that is, in a nutshell, is.
And it's literally identical to what Joe in that process. So if Joe was working with a printer here in LA, the chances are they would have been working with his grandfather.
My grandfather
would have been making the plate. So that's how close you are to that history. Is that his counterparts up in San Francisco would have made it. And if you noticed the wonderful process with the chemicals and caustic materials and all the stuff, this is in the city of Vernon. So for those that know Los Angeles, every community needs a Vernon. We have Farmer John's. Yeah. Oh, they're moving. So so we have that and A&G engraving, right around there. So thanks, George. Appreciate the intro. All right, were there any questions right now for Peter?
Well, actually, I'm going to change that up a little bit. I want to make good on what it says up there. First of all, thank you very much for coming again. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I know Josh likes to answer questions too. But I'm not going to all sitting here tonight to do it. I'm here for the rest of the evening tonight. I'm here all day tomorrow. And I'm, again, happy to answer questions. Yes.
The map that you have back there with Jo Mora's artwork, different places in California, does it have the LA locations of those that you showed? Okay, that's great research.
Yeah.
So on those sculptural things for the architectural buildings, did he just create the drawings and someone else create the sculptures?
It varied. He actually, in his studio, did a lot of the clay molding, or the clay carving, if you will. And so they weren't all done in exactly the same process, but he did the decorative elements on the King City High School auditorium. I have photographs of him in his studio carving the clay in full life size, and these are fairly tall pieces. And so then there would be a plaster to make a negative, and because he would start with the positive, they did a negative, and then they would pour the last to make, they go back to a positive. He worked, so he would do an original, if you will, out of clay or plaster, and then turn it over to a company like Gladdy McBean, who were professionals and have done buildings all over the country and stuff. So.
And the dioramas, did he also make the dioramas?
The dioramas were done hands-on by him, along with, he would hire artisans to work with him, because there are hundreds and hundreds of pieces in these dioramas. And that's only, Will Rogers is only one of several dioramas he did. So when that project would come to, being a cash-paying project, he would hire artisans that he trusted and had vetted and knew could do the work with him. And there's some wonderful pictures of 6 or 7 people in his workshop, all working on a diorama. So, yes.
I'm interested to know about the family while he was on his travels. Was it before his children were born? Was he a young man and no family or wife?
Yes. He headed west when he was about 25 years old, 27, 25, 27. And yes, so he was, and it's, well, I'll elaborate on that question, to your heart's content, but it was a different style to his life before he had a family. His writing changed after he had a family. His artwork changed, I think, after he had a family. So, but yes, that initial move to go west, he did before he got married.
And then his son, Joe Jr., was with him in his adult years?
Yes.
To
Yes.
learn from his dad?
Yes, and what he learned was business. Joey made blue chip stock investments as a young man. And, you know, so was a really good businessman. He was not an artist, and he knew that about himself, particularly compared to his dad. But he loved his dad. I mean, I had the privilege of having many a rum daiquiri at the knee of Joey, and listening to him tell stories about his dad. He always had a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. He absolutely loved his dad, as did, I'm sure, Patty as well, his daughter. But I think Joe was a great father and husband, and so those should be added to the list of descriptors along with everything else. She was very good at the piano, to the point where she did recitals, so that was her art.
How long did he live for?
He lived from 1876 to 1947, so I think it's 71 years or something. Yeah, yes.
Through your presentation, I was constantly reminded of the life of the great Western artist Maynard Dixon, because they lived about the same time, and also they had similar interests in American Indian and cowboy. Did they know each other?
At least to the extent of corresponding between each other, yes. And Maynard Dixon was also a member of the Bohemian Club, so I'm sure they're cross paths there. And I do have some records of copies of letters between the two of them. So yes, yeah.
All right, anyway, thank you so much for coming. We're going to be printing out there. There's Peter's giving tours, so you're welcome to stay. There's still some snacks and some wine and some water out there and all that good stuff. And please spend time at the table back there for some things to purchase, and the table up front. And what a great evening. Don't forget the Printers Fair coming up next month. Madeline, make sure you get your postcard on that.
And right by the drinks.
Yeah, right by the drinks. All right, so grab a glass of something to drink and then get on our mailing list and all that. Thank you, Peter, again. Excellent. And we'll see you guys out there tonight. And if you want to, come back tomorrow. Bro, let somebody else know. Text, do some social messaging about this.
Yeah, bring your friends tomorrow.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. Do you know the card reader?